Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good. From science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure.
Well, hi, everybody, and welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we talk about all things good in the pursuit of the adventure of life. I am Rafe, and, it's a Tuesday, and that makes it a great day because it's the Bufnagle podcast Tuesday. It is, we have reached summertime, officially summertime. A couple days ago, we got to official, what would we call it, astronomical summer. That's a good thing. It's a good thing. You can now start the days getting shorter if you cared about that sort of thing. Here in the north, in the south, your days are getting longer. So that's a good thing for you too. So congratulations, everybody. You've made it halfway around again. Summer is a great time, and we will have a great time here on the Buff because, as you know, we have the world's greatest listeners. You guys have made us a global top 10% podcast. You can reach us as usual at bufnagle@bufnagle.com. Remember to share the love, share the buff, give us a 5-star review. Hit subscribe or like or whatever those things are on your podcast player that tells us that you like what we're doing, that we are giving you the Bufnagle goodness that you deserve. Remember to tell a friend to listen, and you will get a free episode. And somewhere buried in the show notes, you can find a place to buy me a coffee if you are so moved. Last week, I found myself giving blood, and this was not an accidental thing. I have done that in the past, accidentally giving blood, but this was a deliberate thing that I did. I went to the blood donation place and gave some blood. Because it was that time. All right, I've talked about this in the past. How giving blood gives life. How I cannot think of something that requires so little effort on your part to do, but it does so much good. It takes well less than 2 hours of my time from leaving home to coming back again a couple of times a year, and I get to help people who need my blood, babies, accident victims, people with disease, postpartum mommies, you name it. If people need it, you get to provide it if you give blood, and this is a good thing. I think of it kind of a purgatory thing for me. It is certainly not pain-free. There's a little needle stick, and it's not a small needle. These are big needles. The ones they use for drawing blood are substantially larger than if you go to get a blood draw for some lab work or whatever you need to get. If they need to draw your blood at a physical, the doctor's office, they use a little baby tiny needle. This is blood giving needles. These big ones. These are big. These are big needles, and they do that because they're going to grab lots of blood. The high volumes of blood for reasonably long periods of time, and they want to shorten the period of time. So they get in there and they get that stuff going. The sting of that needle is not very much fun. But then I think about what I get to be doing, how my blood is going to bring hope, and hopefully hope and joy in life to someone I will never meet. And that feeling overwhelms this brief, minor discomfort that I am feeling when the needle makes it through the skin and into that vat of blood that's sitting in my arm. Human blood is fantastic, magical stuff. It is made basically of two things. It's made of blood cells, of which there are 3 basic types, and then there is the plasma. Blood cells are, like I said, 3 types. They are erythrocytes, or what we call red blood cells. These things carry oxygen on a molecule called hemoglobin. There are leukocytes, which are white blood cells, of which there are many types. These are the basis of our adaptive immune system. And there are thrombocytes, or platelets, which come into play with blood clotting. Now, plasma, on the other hand, is mostly water, but it carries all the other stuff that is in your blood that isn't blood cells. Okay, so that includes things like protein, glucose, and any other sugars and things that are in your blood, minerals like calcium or phosphorus or those kinds of things, and hormones basically any of the stuff that you have eaten and gets absorbed in your digestive tract, and all this other stuff your body has produced that needs to be either distributed around, like hormones, or waste products. Those things all that is in your blood, okay? And that's part of your plasma. Now, all of this blood and the stuff that is in it gets pumped around your whole body by your heart in a network of arteries and veins and capillaries that distribute this blood to every cell in your body. Your arteries carry oxygen-rich blood from your lungs out to the rest of your body, and your veins carry the carbon dioxide produced by metabolism in your cells back to your lungs to be expelled. Now, there's the exception here is that the pulmonary artery actually carries deoxygenated blood from your heart to your lungs, and your pulmonary vein carries oxygenated blood to your heart to be pumped around your body. So those are the only ones that violate that rule. So if you want to, you could say that arteries carry blood away from the heart and veins carry it to your heart. But in general, we think of arteries as carrying oxygenated blood, and veins carry, well, the deoxygenated blood, the blood that's on the way back to the pump. Capillaries form the nearly invisible, what we might call surface streets, compared to the superhighways that are your arteries and veins. And these capillaries do all the deliveries and pickups at the cellular level. So all of your cells are within close reach of these capillaries, and the things that you need are delivered right there by very narrow little streets, like an old medieval town, narrow streets without the ability to get a high-speed train in there. The capillaries are those guys. In a microliter of your blood, think about a microliter, okay, first, before we get to that. A microliter is, you know how big a liter is, okay? A liter is about a quart. It is a liter is a quart, about. A milliliter is 1/1000th of a liter. There's about 5 milliliters in a teaspoon. So, you know, the spoon that you eat with contains about 5 milliliters, give or take, depending on the size of the spoon. If you had a teaspoon, there's an official teaspoon amount. It's about 5 milliliters. A microliter then is 1/1000th of a milliliter, or 1/1,000,000th of a liter. A microliter is about the size of a grain of salt. It's about it's a millimeter by a millimeter by a millimeter, that cube. A microliter is very small, like I said, the size of a grain of salt. And in 1 microliter of your blood, you can find approximately the following things. You can find somewhere between about 4,000 and 11,000 leukocytes if you are healthy. Okay, if you are sick, you will likely have more than that, maybe as many as 25 or 30,000, or even up to 100,000 if you are really sick. That's per microliter. You're going to have give or take 4 to 10,000, 5 to 10,000, like that, leukocytes in that microliter, in that little grain of salt. Platelets in that little microliter, 150,000 to 400,000 platelets. Again, if you're sick, these numbers can vary, maybe a little bit lower. If you are, if you don't have enough platelets, it'll be less than that. You can have more than 400,000 thrombocytes or platelets in that microliter of blood. And somewhere in the neighborhood, in that microliter of blood, somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 million erythrocytes, or red blood cells. 5 million of them. It's typically a little higher for men than it is for women, but that's a lot of erythrocytes. Now, I did some math here for those of you who like math. And, why wouldn't you be listening to the show unless you like math? Your body has about 5 liters of blood in it, give or take. About 5 liters of blood, which is 5,000 milliliters and 5 million microliters. So if you have 5 million erythrocytes per microliter and you have 5 million microliters, you are looking at something in the neighborhood of 25 trillion erythrocytes in your body. 25 trillion erythrocytes. That's 25 followed by 12 zeros. Now that's a lot of erythrocytes. And you could, if you want even bigger numbers, you can think about maybe 8 billion people on the planet, and you can multiply that by 8 billion, and you're going to have 8 times 25, which is 200, and you're going to follow that by 12 plus another. What's a billion? That's 10 to the ninth. You're going to have like 20. Like that's a lot. You have like 200. I don't even know what that number is. 200 times 10 to the 21st. Yeah, something like that. 10 to the 21st. That's how many erythrocytes there are on the planet. Human erythrocytes. Okay, not even counting like other red-blooded animals. So that there are lots of erythrocytes on the planet, and if you want to do like big numbers of math, that's what you can do. And then you can multiply by all the other planets that there are in the universe, which have life, which is like none. But that's how many erythrocytes there are in the universe. There's a lot of them, and so good for the erythrocytes. I guess they're doing their job. There are lots of them there. They do a lot of work for us. Okay, remember that 5 million erythrocytes is in 1 microliter of your blood. That's, each of these topics, this is interesting to me as I was writing this up. Each of these topics, a discussion of plasma and all these 3 different kinds of cells, and the whole circulatory system. These could be their own episodes. So who knows? That may be coming. But I want to get to blood transfusions and giving blood donations, and a little lesson I learned a long time ago about that sort of thing. People have been attempting to transfuse blood for a long time. And it's a little, it's one thing to eat blood or drink blood. Okay. You can, now some people don't like to do that. I know when I was a kid at the little butcher shop we used to go to, you could get a thing called blood and tongue sausage. And I'm sure some people eat that, which is, if you want to do that, that's fine. I believe there's a Jewish prohibition from eating blood, drinking blood. So that's the thing that they don't do. It's that's not kosher. So if you want to transfuse blood, that's not that you can't just drink it. You have to get it into the circulatory system, and that's a difficult thing to do. And this was first maybe it was attempted prior to this, but it was first documented as being attempted in the 1600s. One Richard Lower, a colleague of Robert Hooke, you remember him, the guy who invented the microscope. Richard Lower did experiments with sheep's blood, transfusing it into other sheep and into humans. And let's just say in general, he was not successful. And that wasn't a thing that worked very well. He just took sheep blood and tried to put it into other sheep, and that kind of worked. He did dogs into dogs, and then he did some sheep blood into humans, and some people lived and some people didn't live. And how do you say it? Given what we know now, it is terrifying how little they knew. But this is I guess this is how you find things out. Keep in mind, in the mid to late 1600s, when Richard Lower was doing this, William Harvey had only done his work on circulation since like 1628. So even understanding the circulation of blood was very new. Harvey had shown that the blood system actually recirculates in a closed loop rather than just kind of sloshing around inside the body. And that model of, I'm going to call it blood sloshing. I think that's the official term. Blood sloshing had that idea had been put forward by Galen and had been in use for 1,500 years. Nobody really knew. Everybody knows when you cut somebody open, they bleed, but nobody really understood that it was in a loop and it went around and the blood and the heart pumped it. Some people thought the heart made blood and sent it out, and then the liver made different kind of blood, and nobody really, and it got absorbed as soon as it got created. And so, they just didn't know. That's all right. It's kind of hard to see down inside there when you don't have microscopes and things. So, and these guys had no tools, right? Lowell, you couldn't just go to, what do they call it? Your scientific supply store and get tools. You couldn't get syringes. You couldn't get, maybe they had some of these things, but they were crude tools. They had some metallurgy. I'm sure you can see evidence that they had good metallurgy some places, but the idea of coming up with very sharp needles and, rubber tubes and hoses plastic pipes and bags to store stuff in. I mean, they didn't have any of that stuff. Okay, so they had and not only that, but they didn't have ready-made tools for doing what Lower was trying to do. They had to do all the tool design and creation by themselves. They had to either know a metallurgist or he needed to. You could try to make these things out of wood, right? That's I can make thing in my workshop that will be very sharp and would cut you, but I can't come up with a way to get it into a tube and get it into the next person's body without doing them more harm than good. So poor Mr. Lower and his colleagues had trouble with this sort of thing. They had no knowledge of things like blood typing and that stuff. Any success in transfusions that he had were likely due to just luck of not putting too much foreign material into the recipient. Okay, so you can put sheep's blood in a person as long as you don't put too much in there. Just like you can put, I don't know, you can put a bullet into somebody, and as long as it's not in the wrong place, it'll be okay probably. But foreign materials inside your body will tend to cause reactions, immune reactions, and that's probably a problem. And that's been a big thing with any sort of transfusions or transplants has been the immune response. Now, blood typing, you are a blood type, either O or A or B or AB, and then you have pluses, minuses on them, a lot of those things, and that's a genetic kind of thing. That idea in those three basic groups, O, A, and B, was discovered by a guy named Karl Landsteiner in 1901. And he got the Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine in 1930 for his work with blood typing. He had shown that there was an immune response to incompatible blood types that destroys red blood cells and then releases free hemoglobin into the bloodstream. And that's a problem that tends to cause a lot of problems for the recipient and can even kill the recipient. But he discovered this blood typing in 1901, and by 1930 he had won the Nobel Prize. They did Rh blood groups, okay, in 1930s, again with Landsteiner involved. He was involved in that thing too. And then they came up with improvements in anticoagulants to stop blood from setting up into a glob of goo that you can't use. And then preservation techniques improved, and they could get blood to last long periods of time, several days, if not several weeks. And then eventually they were able to collect blood. They were able to type it. They recognized that if you mix two people's blood together and it stayed liquidy, then that was better than if it globbed up and created a problem. So they understood that people had different types of blood, but getting a real good idea of what was going on took this Landsteiner guy. And eventually, when they figured out how to store it and how to type it, they could do things like blood banks. And that's really where this whole idea of blood donations came into being in the middle part of the 1900s. So early on, they did transfusions of whole blood. They would just take somebody's blood out and stick it in the next person. But now blood is broken typically into components for transfusions. They pull out the red cells, or they pull out the plasma, or they pull out the platelets. That's what's typically done. Occasionally they will do white cells, but that's not done really often. I don't know why. The articles I was reading didn't mention that, and I wasn't ready to. Yeah, I suppose I could figure that out. If you know what, that's how should I say that that information is left as an exercise to the reader. Okay. Or the listener in this case. In 2019, more than 10 million units. Okay, a unit is essentially a half a liter, right? 500 milliliters, a little bit more than a pint. 10 million units of red blood cells, 2 million units of platelets, and 2 million units of plasma were transfused in the U.S. alone. So you move that out to the rest of the world, and there's a lot of blood donation, transfusion happening. And that comes mostly from donations. I don't think what would be the opposite of a donation. You don't get coerced donation. So these are people giving blood, and like I did last week, and then it gets used to help people. Now the Red Cross contacts me all the time to give blood. They were like, "Hey, we have a shortage. Come give blood when you can." And so they have records of my blood going back. I found my records on their website. No, I did not hack it. It's part of the thing when you get an account. And they have records for my donations back to June of 1997. So that's almost 30 years. But I've been giving blood since my first donation my senior year in high school. There was a blood draw at the high school, and I was one of the ones who did that. You had to be 18 at the time, and I was 18 in January of my senior year, so I did that. So I'm based upon those records and some other things I have evidence. I have reason to believe that I'm in the neighborhood of 100 units donated, which had I been really thorough and really dedicated to this task, I could be substantially higher than that. But I do think about those 100 units donated, and each unit weighed about a pound. So I would really be a heavy person if I would still have all that blood in me. Okay, that's a joke. That's a joke. I was implying that I might weigh 100 pounds more if I hadn't given all that blood. But I tend to give blood pretty regularly, and because I think it's a good thing to do. Okay, just so you know, I think it's a good thing to do. So you are required to wait at least 8 weeks between donations so your body can regenerate its supply of cells. It has to make new cells to replace the ones that dripped out of you. The 8 weeks gives you what? 6 times 8 is 48. So you can get 6.5 of those per year. So it's like 7 every 2 years. I'm sorry, so 13 every 2 years. 13 every 2 years, and if so, every 20 years. It's like that you can get to 100 donations very easily in under 20 years. So, and I've been at it almost 40, and I'm only at about 100. So I've been kind of a slacker in doing this thing. Had I really been on it, I would weigh even less. I guess I'll put it that way. So a regular donation, if you haven't ever done this, consists of lying on a bed or a chair or some kind of cot thing. It's kind of like a chase lounge. You kind of sit half up, but kind of leaning back, and there's a little place where you rest your arm. And they put a needle in your arm, and then you bleed into this bag for a couple minutes until you generate about 500 milliliters of blood in this little bag that hangs on the end of that tube. Your body volume, like I said before, is about 5 liters, which makes you in the neighborhood of 10 to 12 units. It's 5 to 6 liters, so 10 to 12 units of blood. So you can't give too much blood, or otherwise you're going to have a problem. You're going to be all tired, and you're going to need a transfusion. So that'd be foolish to do. So they take a unit every 8 weeks. They can do that without any sort of worry. But there's a new way now to get blood that has come out over the last couple of years, called apheresis. So instead of bleeding into a bag, you bleed into a tube connected to a machine. Okay, so the at the end of the tube is a machine instead of a bag, and there's a bag on the other side of the machine, but the machine does a fancy thing. The machine centrifuges the blood inside it before it puts the blood in the bag, and the blood gets split into its component parts, plasma, leukocytes, and erythrocytes, in the machine. And the different parts can be put into different bags, and the stuff that the blood center wants, mostly red blood cells, that's kept, and the other stuff gets pumped back into me, and it does that twice. It's like a double. It essentially takes two units of blood from me, and it does it every 16 weeks. Okay, so it does that. It takes the blood out of me, spins it down, puts the plasma back in, and then it does it again. And there you go. It takes about half an hour instead of 10 minutes for the bleed into the bag system. But like I said, because they are taking more good stuff of mine, I can only do this every 16 weeks instead of every 8 weeks. So that I don't know. You decide whether you think that's better or worse. It's fewer needle sticks. It's fewer appointments. So, some of us are really busy doing very important things, so we have less time for this. Most of the time I do this thing called, they call it Power Red at the Red Cross. So, it's apheresis, and it's immediate blood spinning and return of some of the stuff they don't want, which is kind of interesting because then I have to deal with it. It's not a problem. It was my blood anyway. They took the good stuff from me. They took the blood and gave me back the urine, essentially what it boils down to. So after you do the donation, they pull the needle out, and then they wrap you up with a little bandage, and they tell you to not lift heavy things. They want you to sit there and have a little something to eat. They give you a juice box and a cookie or some pretzels or some fruit snacks. Grandma would say, "Oh, just a little something." You have to have a little something to keep you from getting lightheaded and pass out. Sometimes that happens after people give blood. I've seen that happen. to people at donations. Not very often, because I think people who do that, they know how to get through that sort of thing. You should not go do that during a fast. You shouldn't go try to give blood if you're starving, hungry, and you haven't done that, and you shouldn't give blood if you've given blood recently, because you can pass out. Your volume can drop too low if you're not doing the apheresis thing, and you can feel a little queasy after you're done. Maybe you're tired. You get a good nap, and you'll be good to go. So last week I was giving blood. Now you know all about blood. You know all about circulation, its history, and last week I was doing this thing in Noblesville here, which is just outside Westfield, and I went to give blood at the new blood donation place. It's probably a word for that. Normally I do blood drives. I find a blood drive that's nearby. There's a website where you can find blood drives local to your area, temporarily in time. So you can find a blood drive at a church or a business, or like at the nature center over at the park or somewhere. They'll have blood drives, and if it's your time to donate, you can say, "Give me show me all the blood drives that are within 10 miles of me in the next 3 days or 2 weeks," or something like that. But the best way to do this is to find a place that sponsors a blood drive very consistently. Like, I don't know, maybe every 8 weeks they'll have a blood drive. And then you could get on an 8 weeks donation schedule, and you can get your 6.5 donations every year and fly through your first 100 donations. This new place where they have the donation center, it's in a little strip mall near the grocery store. So that's really nice. It's well lit. It's neat and clean. You would hope it's neat and clean. They're taking your blood, right? There are smiling people there, which is really nice. The blood donation people seem to be some of the nicest people I have found on the planet. They are going to be open 4 days a week here, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday. So it will be easy for me to get on and stay on schedule. When I worked in North Carolina, our company had a blood drive every 8 weeks, and it was great. And and they did it at the office. So you were at the office, and every 8 weeks they'd be there, and you got on a great schedule. It was very easy. It was easy to do. You would see the same people there every time, but they got a consistent draw there. It's nice when other groups do those blood drives, but it gets you off. It can get you off your donation cycle. If you have one, it can mess that up. But try to get on a cycle. That's a good way to do it. So I walked into the blood donation center last week, and there were two ladies sitting there at the welcome desk, and they said hi, and I give my name, and I showed my blood donor card and my ID, and there was no waiting for the Power Red machine because I had an appointment. So I go in there, and you have to answer questions and things like that. Make sure you're not harboring some sort of terrible disease like, I don't know, hepatitis, something like that, typhoid, bad things like that. And I go and I bleed into the machine for 30 minutes, and I chat with the blood drawing ladies. That's, what are you going to do? And I don't know what the qualifications are for being a blood drawing worker or person, but I know there's at least there's some certification for drawing this blood. They have to follow. There's a standard protocol they follow, and they got to follow it to the letter. Otherwise, this is a regulated product, and it's a human based product thing. So you got to make sure you're not violating all sorts of rules. There's prep of all the paperwork they have to do, and there's equipment they have to deal with, like the little bags and the hoses. And using this apheresis machine is not a simple task. There's insertion and prep of the site, or inspection and prep of the site on my arm. There's cleaning that area so I don't get an infection. There's the actual needle stick, which is a trick. I'm glad I don't have to do it to myself because I don't really know how I would do it. There's monitoring and checking during the donation. There's the end of the donation procedure, where you have to turn off the machine or close up the bag. You got to pull out the needle. You have to do site cleanup. You have to do the bandage. You have to monitor and check people during recovery, or whatever what they call it when you're sitting there having your cookies and juice boxes. And I think most of the blood drawing ladies that I meet there, I think they're mostly nurses of some type. They run the whole range. Some of them are young, just out of school. Some are moms. You can tell they don't take any. They are all business. They don't take any grief. And some are grandma types. Some are tiny. Some are really big. Some are tatted up. Some are dainty. Some are shy, and some are gregarious. There are nurses. There are male nurses, of course. Not as many as there are female nurses, but they guys do a great job too. Some of these nurses are chatty. Some of them are shadowing others because they are learning a new technique or they're in some kind of training. It is one of the great grand displays of the diversity of good people doing good work. These people come in all shapes and sizes, but they have one focus, and that is get good blood from people giving blood. They are chatty with each other. You hear this all the time. You're sitting there for, I don't know, anywhere from between, by the time you do all the sitting and the testing and the checking and the bleeding and the fixing up, you hear all their conversations. Jenny, you take your break when this guy's set up and I'll monitor him. Or Trisha, how'd your meeting go with your landlord? Or Chelsea, when you went to Branson, where did you stay? We're thinking of going. You hear these conversations these guys have with each other, and these are most of the time they're friends, you would hope, and they're looking out for each other and they're working together as a team to do this stuff. It's wonderful to see, and all this time while they're doing whatever they're doing, they are taking care of me, lying on this little bed, bleeding into the machine, and it's a little chilly in this room due to an overly aggressive air conditioner. And one of the ladies came over and said, "Oh, honey, are you warm enough?" I mean, they're so wonderful. I can get you a heated blanket. And I'm like, "Oh, heated blanket. This ought to be great. Yes, please. Thank you. I'll take two." So she goes to the blankie box and she brings out, if you ever had these heated blankets in the hospital or something, like, they are just great when you're feeling chilly like that. And we know we are always stuck with these over aggressive air conditioners. And she brings the blankie out and she puts it on me and snuggles me in there and tucks me in and says, do you need anything else? And I'm like, what else do I need? This is great. What a wonderful human being. It was a wonderful situation. God has made a special mold in which he makes nurses. It is, they are wonderful folks. I cannot say enough good things about the people that do the blood drawing. It's wonderful. As I was leaving, I stopped and I talked to the ladies at the front, the ones who had checked me in. And it turns out they weren't employees at all. Actually, they were nursing students who were doing community health, like a community health day is what they called it. They have to go see healthcare in action in what they called a community setting. So a blood donation thing that it's health related, and it's out in the wild, right, as they say. So I talked to them about blood donation and what they're doing in school and their aspirations. Why do they want to be nurses and all that kind of stuff? And I mentioned that seeing blood collection in action is a very important thing. It makes it readily known to the people doing the work that the patients getting transfusions, that those patients, they require an army of people behind the scenes that are making the transfusions possible. Someone has to put the blood in the bags and make sure it's safe and clean and documented and all those things. And those people working at the blood center, they are doing heroic work with essentially with no fanfare. It is there you go. There's a great thing. There's a great human thing that they are doing, is these people at the blood center. And when I worked in pharma, one of the drugs I worked on for a while was a drug for a disease called myelofibrosis, and that's a really bad disease where your bone marrow slows down its production and then eventually stops making blood. So bad things happen to you. There was a way that we measured patients in these studies to see how well the medicines worked, and it was a combination of symptoms that were scored. There are a bunch of symptoms you measure, and then you score them on a scale, and then you add these things up. It's called a combined symptom score or a total symptom score, something like that. And one thing that we collected on these patients was the number of blood transfusions they were getting. And it always seemed to me that this blood transfusion intensity or frequency or count was the measure of disease. That was if you needed blood transfusions or if you needed them more rapidly, then that was a measure of severity. And we were able to demonstrate that our drug drastically reduced the need for transfusions when compared to the current treatment available, or at least it increased the time to next transfusion. Right? So if the time to next transfusion is short, then you have a high intensity. If the time to transfusion is long, then you have a lower intensity. So we succeeded at minimizing your need for transfusions. And I remember having discussions with a doc at one point about the disease, and he said something flippant like, "Well, I'm not sure why we need a new medicine for this. We have a medicine. I just give my patients another transfusion if they need it. It's an easy treatment. I don't see why we need a new thing. And all I could think about was all the people at the blood donation things creating blood products that this guy flippantly just ordered up. I just order up a transfusion, and I keep thinking, well, it's guys like me who make this blood, and then there are all these people working behind the scenes to get the blood to your blood bank, and you just I know to you it's just checking a box on a chart, or even worse, clicking a box on a screen, but there are people running blood drives and guys hauling heavy boxes and crates of stuff around, and there's equipment and cots and apheresis machines and blanket warmers and IT guys and blood drawing nurses and don't forget the donors. Okay, there's a lot of people out there. All these people are doing things to produce this precious resource. There are people that really need these transfusions. Accident victims and postpartum mommies and their babies, surgery patients, and so on. And and the myelofibrosis patients need the blood too. So, but if we can reduce the amount that they need, then that's a good thing. I mean, they do laparoscopic surgery now to help. And one great thing is it reduces the amount of blood that people need. They've seen a drastic decrease in the amount of blood that's needed for surgery when they do things laparoscopically. So that's a great thing. You can't just say, well, I'm just going to order up some more blood. It's not like you go out to the blood tree and pull a bag off it doesn't grow on trees. Okay. If we can reduce the number of needed transfusions for myelofibrosis patients without doing any other harm, then we should do that. Okay. I think, blood doesn't grow on trees. So I was talking to the nurses students at this donation center about these kinds of things. And I thought of them being nurses someday. And I thought about the things that make nurses great, and like the ones that I meet at the donation center, what makes them great. And I think it's this. Okay, a long time ago, I was going to have surgery under anesthesia, and as I rolled into the pre-op room, I noticed that one of the OR nurses was a friend of mine, the wife of a friend. She was a friend of mine and the wife of a friend of mine, and I rolled in there and I saw her there, and Mindy, I didn't know you would be here, I said to her. And she said something like, well, earlier this week, I saw your name on the schedule. So I switched my schedule so I could be here to watch out for you today. And man, that was what a wonderful thing to hear. All sorts of people are scurrying around and the machines are beeping and bright lights are lighting. People are getting dressed up to cut me open and look inside me. And I'm on this rolling table thing with an IV in my arm, just watching things swirl around me. And now I have a special guardian angel in the room looking out for me. It was very good. So they get ready to put me under, I guess is the phrase. And they're going to do this by starting a drip of something into my IV. And then I'm supposed to count backwards from 100 just to keep me busy, I guess, as this stuff takes effect. And I know I won't get very far. This anesthesia drip is very powerful stuff. So I say, okay, let's go. And the drip starts. And I start counting. 100. It's a little frightening at this point because everyone is looking at me and I know I'm going under. And as soon as I do, they are going to start doing things that they do. They're going to be putting a breathing mask on me and flipping me over to get access to my spine and cutting me open and that sort of thing. 99. And they are all just waiting for me to conk out. I'm naked except for this flimsy little sheet. The OR is cool, actually quite cold by design, and I have a blanket on in addition to this sheet. And they are all watching me. It's tense. It's getting frightening, and it's cold. 98. I start feeling really, really, really tired, like someone turned up the gravity in the room. My arms are heavy. My eyelids are heavy. My chest is heavy. My skin is heavy. Everything is really heavy. It is tense in this room. It is cold. And it is scary. And then I feel something different. It is Mindy. She has taken my hand in hers and is just holding it. I'm able to turn my eyes to her and I see her looking down at me and I see the gentle smile of a friend in the eyes above her mask. And suddenly the bustle goes away and everything is quiet and the coldness evaporates and the scary drifts away like the foggy mist broken by a ray of sunshine. The magnified gravity pulls my eyes shut. And as I am now drifting off in this now quiet, now warm, now calm darkness, I think to myself, feeling Mindy's human touch on my hand, wow. If this is what it feels like to die, I don't think it'll be that bad. I never made it to 97. Next thing I knew, they were telling me to wake up. All was done. I was in the recovery room. So I told the nursing students about the thing that makes great nurses like the ones at the blood donation center, great nurses like Mindy. They care. And they know the power of touch. Blood and touch are life. Blood and touch are life. So give blood and thank the wonderful people that make it possible for you to do such a magical thing as to give your life to someone else and hold someone's hand. Seek the good, live virtuously, and flourish, and enjoy the adventure of life.
It's going to be a great day.